folks, welcome to 20th Century Adventures. I'm Nathanael Logsdon, and today we're going to talk about keeping warm. Taking a bath in the snow is probably not one of those. Anyway, we got lots of great tips and tricks and some cool things we're going to do, so check it out. I'll tell you what, the things I do for this show, I don't know. So, I want to talk about a old-time mountain remedy, old-fashioned remedy. A lot of people in the 20s still clung to a lot of 19th century concepts, and so there were a lot of home remedies that were done for different things. This is a remedy that I actually learned from an older gentleman who had heard it. He had done it himself. He'd heard it from his ancestors. It had been handed down through the years. Definitely fits this period. And I have done this before, and it did work. But I want to make a disclaimer right here and say, I don't recommend you try this at home. So here I am. I'm going to work on a remedy for cold feet. You know, when you get out in the woods and your feet get cold when you're hiking or you're hunting, and next thing you know, you're miserable because your feet are cold. It makes your whole body cold. So this is a method, and there's some science behind it. You're basically shocking your system into building circulation and releasing enzymes in your body that make you more impervious to pain, more or less. It raises your tolerance, but it also gets your blood moving and increases circulation, so that's helpful too. But again, disclaimer, don't try this. Don't come after me if you get frostbite. So it is 17 degrees out here right now with a wind chill around 3. And we've got some snow on the ground, so this is a great opportunity to do this. Now the way this remedy works is you put hot water in a basin and you soak your feet in hot water for as long as you can stand, and then you go run in the snow barefoot for as long as you can stand and go back to the hot water for as long as you can stand, and so on and so forth. And that hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold is supposed to shock the system and increase your ability to keep your feet warm. And it's been about 20 years since I did this, so figured it was about time for a refresher. But anyway, that's what we're going to try here. I've got my hot water. Alright, here we go. Ooh, that actually feels pretty nice. A little warm, a little warm. Woo-wee. Okay, can't stand it anymore. It's time to go run in the snow. And when you can't stand the cold, you put it back in the warm. Ah. Woo-wee! Doesn't take long for it to get too warm. Woo boy! The idea is that eventually it'll kind of level out and the hot won't feel as hot and the cold won't feel as cold. Now, as far as the hot feeling less hot, I figure it's eventually going to cool down from my icy feet getting in it. But keep trying. Woo! Ow! That's cold. Boy, that snow gets cold fast. I'm not handling the cold as well as I'm handling the heat. That might have something to do with getting older too. Now see, at this point, the water doesn't feel very hot at all. But if I leave it in there long enough, then it starts to get hot. Really interesting, weird sensations. So you can do that as many or as few times as you want. I think I'm done with this now. I don't want to do any more. So I'm going to dry off, put my shoes back on, and we'll see if that helps keep my feet from getting cold as often. They certainly feel very fresh and very alive. I can feel every little thing. Feel like I got some good circulation going. Definitely. Well, that was fun. When hiking or hunting, you want to try to not get too warm. I know that seems odd, but I've got my layers on. I've got my long johns underneath, and I'm wearing wool outer layers, but I'm not wearing a coat. In fact, Horace Kephart talks about not taking a coat unless it's extreme conditions, because it'll make you too hot. What happens is you'll sweat through your base layer as you hike uphill, especially if you've got a pack, or you're carrying your game with you, or you've got even just carrying a heavy rifle. You'll get warm as you go up and down the hills and through the valleys, and you'll sweat through that layer, and then when you do stop, your base layer is wet and it chills you faster, gets you cold faster, and it can lead to hypothermia. So when we're out doing our scouts, we're hunting, or we're getting to the place that we're going, or just out communing with nature in cold conditions, you don't want to wear too much clothing. So this is about what I would want to go out into this weather with. Standing still, especially with the wind coming across, I feel cool, but I'm not sweating. And if I get out here and start really doing some heavy hiking, I'm gonna get warm enough that I'll need to unbutton a few layers of my shirt here in order to let off some of that heat to keep from sweating too much. So that's the best way to stay warm and not get too cold when you're out and about in the woods in the winter. Always helps to have a good stick with you too, especially if you've got period shoes. These boots, they're pretty good, but at times on inclines, you know, they're smooth-soled boots, and it's good to have that stick for extra grip. So let's talk about how they kept warm while driving, especially these things. Now, of course, if I had a top on this car, which I don't, that would make a big difference because it would help keep some of the wind off, but you still would have open sides. A lot of these early cars had side curtains that would attach, so you'd have a rod that came out of this door, and it would fasten somewhere up in here, and it would snap to the top, and that helps some, but it's still a cold car. There's no heat in it. So there were a couple of things that they would do to try to stay warmer while driving. There were different types of foot warmers. This one is really cool. This one it works kind of like our hot water bottle. You fill it with the hot water. Oh my, that's hot. Whew. So you fill it up, and then notice it's at an angle. You ride with your feet on it like that. So these would go on the floorboard of the car, gives you some warmth going down the road. When they get cold, you just take the cap off, pour the water back in the radiator, go underneath where the radiator drain valve is, and open it up to fill it back up. So you could constantly keep refreshing this with hot water. This is another form of foot heater. These worked with charcoal block. It was pressed charcoal, kind of like a grill briquette nowadays, but it was one big block, and that would be stuck down in here and lit. I don't have one of those, but I do have some hot coals from my wood stove, and so we'll put those in there. And that charcoal would slowly burn in there, and it would put heat off the same way that the water one worked. I've never had much luck with these. I think the hot water bottle would probably be better. Now, the other thing that every automobile that was going to be traveling in cold weather would have at this time is a lap robe. This is a black bear hide. Sometimes most commonly they were made out of horse hide. So it'd be a tanned horse skin, usually with a winter hide, winter hair on it. And then it's backed with either wool or some other thick backing on it. And it's got a little wool felt trim around the edge to make it pretty. And these would be cut square, and then you would put them over your legs like this and tuck it up around you. And you'd be surprised at how warm that'll make you, just having that covering your legs like that. So those are ways that they kept warm while driving these old cars in the winter. Of course, one of the easiest ways to stay warm in camp is by doing camp chores. Whether you're hauling water or splitting firewood, setting up your camp, getting things ready for the night, all of those things, making food, it all is going to help keep you warm as long as you're physically moving. When you sit still, that's when you start to get cold. So as long as you can keep moving throughout the day, you shouldn't have much trouble staying warm. So now let's talk about staying warm at night. While you're sleeping is when most people get cold at these sorts of events. When you are camping in extreme weather conditions, staying warm all night is the key to getting a good night's rest and being able to make it through the day tomorrow. So we want to take a lot of care in how we set up our sleeping arrangements. Now there's lots of ways that you can sleep. Sleeping directly on the ground is going to be cold because you're sucking up that cold from the frozen ground. So you really don't want to sleep directly on the ground in these conditions. What you can do is you can cut some pine boughs or cedar boughs, lay them down. You want to create an air gap of some sort. Not enough that wind gets underneath of you, but enough that you're insulated. Air is actually a good insulator, believe it or not, as long as it's not moving. So if you can get yourself even a few inches off the ground, that's going to help a lot. So in this situation here, we've got a half-face shelter, we've got an army cot, and we're going to do a few things to make this a little more enjoyable for the night. So the first thing you want to do when you're packing all your gear for the weekend, or wherever you're going, whatever you're doing, you want to include a sacrificial blanket. Now when I say sacrificial, I mean this blanket is not going to go over you. This blanket goes over your cot. And the goal is you want to be able to stop the airflow underneath your cot. So you want this thing to go all the way to the floor on both sides, and preferably down the ends too. This blanket's not real long, so it's not going to go down our ends. What I might consider doing here in this situation if I didn't have a blanket long enough, I would use 2 to make sure that I'm getting full coverage over the ends all the way around. So that creates this air gap underneath here. The wind won't blow through it and make you cold underneath, but it gets you up off the ground, right? So that's our step 1. Now, I don't usually carry a pillow. I just roll up my coat and use that as a pillow. So the next thing you'll want to do is you'll want to set up whatever bedroll you have. Now, I normally would bring a bigger bedroll. I'm not actually staying out here tonight, so I didn't bring everything, but I would lay out whatever bedroll I'm going to use on top of this. Now, this is something interesting. This is a bedroll cover, and it's an original. This one is well beyond its life expectancy, so it's more of an artifact than something I would actually use in the field. But these were real popular, and it's a cover made of canvas that you roll your blankets and stuff up in. And this can take the place of the sacrificial blanket if you've got one of these. So this unrolls on top of your cot. Just like that. And these flaps come out. And you see how they go all the way down? They're doing the same thing that blanket is doing. So if you don't have one of these, just use a blanket or 2. But one of these, boy, this is really nice. And of course, you can actually lay your blankets in this, fold those flaps over, and roll the whole thing up. So this can keep your whole bed contained. You can carry it on your back. So then you have a couple of blankets or maybe a sleeping bag that go inside of that. Sleeping bags are ideal. They were just coming into popularity at this time. And if you check out Sarge Vining, I think he's got a video on how to make one, period style sleeping bag. And you can still find originals, although once again, I don't recommend using original stuff in the field. It's just too valuable to let it be damaged that way. So this gives you an idea of how to keep that airflow from making you cold. Throw as many blankets as you want on top of you and around you. The sleeping bag's nice because you won't slide out of it the way you might with blankets. What I do with blankets is I'll fold them in half, and then I'll unfold one side like this so that the longer side's hanging out, and then lay another one with the long side going that way, and maybe do another 2 if it's going to be really cold. And then when you wrap those over you, each side layers over, and you don't have a gap along the side of your body. So that's a good way to get that coverage without having a sleeping bag. Of course, you still have the risk of your feet poking out the bottom. Something that I've picked up, and this may have been less common by the later part of the early 20th century because these things were almost extinct, but this is a buffalo hide. And for early impressions, if you're doing anything up to about 1910, a buffalo robe is reasonable that you may have had access to one, especially in the West. But if you're doing 20s and later, this really wouldn't be an appropriate item to have because buffalo were so few by then, or the American bison was so decreased in numbers that these weren't real common anymore. But this has been my best investment ever when it comes to staying warm. You cannot beat a good buffalo hide. So this has got the hair on, winter hide. and you can wrap up in that or just throw it over the top of you, and that leather will hold and reflect your body heat back to you. So that's the way to go whenever possible. Now, something else we have here that would have been probably commonly used are these hot water bottles. This is a Portland hot water bottle, guaranteed, and in the stopper here it has the patent date of March 27th, 1906. So pretty cool there. Now this probably would have had a wool cover that it slid inside of so you don't burn yourself, because these things can get pretty hot. But you fill that with basically boiling hot water. Put your stopper in there. Whew, that's warm. And then these can be set in the bed at your feet or wherever. I'm not going to lay this one in there because the gasket's gone on it. It had a little rubber gasket at one time, and that's gone, so it leaks a little bit. So I'm not going to stick it in there right now because then I'll get my bed wet. But hot water bottle or soapstone, a large chunk of soapstone that can be heated up by the fire. That's a good way to hold some residual heat. It won't last all night, but it'll do a pretty good job for quite a while. Now, the last few most important things when it comes to getting ready for the night is change your socks. The first thing you want to do when you're ready to go to bed is get your boots off, take off your old socks, even if they feel dry, even if you say, oh, I waterproofed my boots and my socks are dry. Your body sweats, even in micro amounts, and your socks will be damp whether they feel it or not. So if you put on fresh, clean, dry socks, the other thing is they have to be clean. And it really pays to bring a separate pair of socks for every single night that you're going to be out. If they're not clean, there's little bits of dried skin and dirt and things like that that get pressed into the bottom of that sock. And those particles of dirt and skin will conduct cold. And even if your socks are dry, even if you know they're dry, you dried them during the day, you set them up by the stove or whatever, and they're dry, if they're not clean, they're still going to conduct cold. So dry, clean socks, and I always recommend wool all the way around. That's going to make a big difference on staying warm. The other thing you want to do is you want to have a soft knit cap of some sort. You can put that on, and you can pull it down over your ears, and you can pull it down over your eyes. There's nothing worse than your eyeballs getting cold while you're sleeping. So I like to bring it up to the tip of my nose and then bring my blankets over my lip, and that gives me a gap where I can breathe, and so I can get good breathing, good clean fresh air all night, and my head stays warm. I'm not losing heat out of the top of my head. I don't have to worry about it falling off because it's a knit cap. It comes down, covers my whole head. So sleep with that on. That will make a world of difference as well. In extreme cold conditions, it's really important to dress appropriately to the weather. So wool is always going to be the best. I know some people are allergic to wool. Sometimes It's just a matter of getting your body used to it. If you're not breaking out in a rash and wool just makes you itchy, you need more time to become accustomed to it. If you're breaking out in a rash, then you probably shouldn't wear it. But the finer the wool, the more comfortable it is against your skin. So look for a base layer that has virgin wool, a very fine wool, preferably maybe Angora or something like that would even be acceptable if you find that a base layer of sheep's wool is not comfortable to you. Try different things. Wool is an amazing fiber. It keeps you warm even when it's wet. It doesn't conduct cold. It retains heat and body warmth. So you can't go wrong with wool. It is the best fiber to use, and there is nothing synthetic or modern that is anywhere close to as good as actual wool. So I highly recommend wool. Now, have a good outer coat. You won't always use it. As you see in the video, I talk about different things that you do and why you should or should not wear a coat at certain times. But have one. If nothing else, it makes a great pillow. But definitely you want some sort of outer layer, especially if it's going to be really extremely cold conditions. Your main layer should also be wool. A lighter weight wool is ideal. I've got wool pants, I've got a wool shirt, and underneath I have a wool cotton blend long underwear. Wool cotton blends are nice because if you don't react well to wool against your skin, a little bit of cotton helps reduce some of that, makes it smoother, makes it nicer. Good footwear, if at all possible. I recommend having summer footwear and winter footwear. You don't want to walk around in boots that are too big. They're going to chafe your skin, it's going to cause blisters, it'll be uncomfortable if you're slopping around in boots that are too big. However, if boots fit you well in the summertime, then in the wintertime when you want to wear thicker socks, those boots are going to be too tight. Also, air is an insulator. If there's no airflow and just an air pocket, that's a good insulator and helps keep you warmer. Your feet will be warmer if you've got a gap between your feet and your socks and the outer side of your boot. So if you are really cramming your feet into those boots because of your thick socks and now it all feels tight and crunched up, that's more than just a discomfort to your feet. It's actually going to make your feet colder because you're restricting circulation, you're restricting flow, and you're not getting that benefit of the added air pocket insulation. So if you can afford it, if you can make it happen, get a pair of boots that are a size bigger for winter wear so that you've got room to put those bigger socks in. Get some good thick wool socks. Definitely you want a broad brim hat, because if it's actively precipitating, if it's raining, sleeting, or snowing, you're going to want that broad brim to keep that stuff off your face and out of your ears and all of that. However, you also want a soft cap of some sort. So a soft cap like this will hug your head better. It will be warmer because on these bigger hats, air can get up underneath of them. They've got vents in the top. This is going to keep your head warmer, and it's ideal for conditions when it has stopped snowing and you're out doing things and you're not worried about getting that stuff in your face. It's still got a little bit of a visor so it can help keep the sun out of your eyes. But this is a good working cap. It's going to help you hike and do camp chores and go hunting and all that stuff without being in the way that a broad brim hat is. But then the broad brim hat is totally necessary at certain times. So put both in your kit. These can roll up in your bedroll or shove down in a pack. You can even stick it in a pocket. It's a great way to go. Gloves of some sort are a necessity. I like to carry a pair of leather gloves for doing camp chores, cooking, anything where I'm going to be handling hot stuff or splitting firewood. Some leather gloves are nice, but I really love these fingerless wool mitts. What they do is they keep the veins on the back of your hand covered, and that stays warm and circulates into your fingertips, and your fingertips actually stay pretty warm. Now they do get a little cold, but I've got lots of dexterity. I don't have to worry about my gloves getting in the way. I completely forget that I have gloves on, and I can do anything I want to do. I can even play guitar if I want to. But my hands stay warm enough to be comfortable. They're not hurting. They're not exactly warm, but they're not cold. So, and these, again, can shove into a pocket, ready to use whenever you need them, and then have a good pair of heavy gloves, and maybe even wool-lined mitts, or some mitts made of leather with the hair to the inside. Those are really great for extreme cold weather, because again, the air pocket that we talked about, so you have air between the hairs in the fur, and then you've got air between your fingers, and your fingers can move easily inside of a pair of mittens. So that's a good way to go to keep your hands warm, especially if you know that you're going to be doing things, or if you're not going to be as active in situations that are going to be in teens or single digits or below. Definitely want some good mitts. So that's the basics of the clothing. Be sure to check out logsdonandco.com. You can find some of these clothes and gear available on that website. And of course, as always, a great way to warm up is with a beverage. You can use a hot beverage such as coffee or tea or hot chocolate, or tried and true is a little tot of brandy. That warms the gullet every time. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you down the road.
Party night we must part.